unfolding together in Dialogue Village.
Kai, thanks so much for sparing the time. I just felt like giving you a short introduction in this conversation, because there's a few quotes which jump out to me on your page. Absolutely instrumental. Somebody's described you as. I love that. I might want to unpick that. Hyperactive and tentacular. What fantastic words. And this project's messy and magical entanglements, and I think that's something that really, one thing that I really like to talk to you about during our time together. But welcome to the Dialogue Village podcast, and I'm glad to meet you for the first time.
Yeah, and thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm really glad to be here, and really glad to talk with you about tentacularity. Talk to you about magical and messy entanglements. I mean, I love wordplay, so yeah. If I don't know if you are transcribing this or if there's captioning, well, we're definitely going to need some editing if there is that.
Okay.
I'm always full of new neologisms, like new words.
Yeah. Got you. That's. I'll have some fun doing that.
Great.
Yeah. The entanglement, the messy entanglement is something that gives me some comfort in the fact that I don't like planning things, and I don't want to have a set list. I've said this to you in the email. I don't want to have a set list of questions, and there's so neurodivergency and normal ways of doing things is so like homogenous and predictable. It just gets boring. So I love just diving in, although there's this sense of risk and fear, and
exactly.
But the phenomenon of subjectivity is something that I'm really
but it's also absolutely about bouncing off each other, right? It's also about kind of being a little bit vulnerable.
Yeah.
And saying, okay, I've never met Johnny before. He might be a serial killer, but luckily we're on screen, so I'm going to be fine. And let's see where we can go together, that you can't go alone, that I can't go alone. Let's just kind of mess about a little bit. If we come to detours, we might dive into that together. If we come to rabbit holes, we might go and explore that, or we might say, okay, another time, another date, another day. So yeah, I mean, I love the fact that things aren't kind of fixed, and I love the idea that we are not trying to get fixed, and I mean that in all senses of the term, getting fixed.
Yeah.
I mean,
and already my mind's going down the rabbit hole.
Sorry,
it's
okay,
okay.
I'm trying to be focused.
Certain things are fixed, and we have to take turns talking, right? And that can be like that can be a problem, can be a challenge.
That's actually a good point, especially with COVID, and people learn how to use this sort of online format of conversation, and we learn to mute ourselves, and we learn to let other people have the time to speak, and we learn how to hold the space to an extent for other people when they're thinking and so on. So I think that's quite interesting, and you're right, there are things that are kind of fixed. And one of the things that's interesting, because I'm an artist, and one of the things that I like to think, and many artists and creative people and neurodivergent people like to think, is that the fact that there are rules, the fact that there are fixed ways of doing things. I mean, many of us try to fight against that and try to come up with strategies against that, but also at the same time, the fact that there are these kind of restrictions also enable us, or it brings out the resourcefulness that many of us have had to become, like by choice or also by circumstances.
Yeah.
And we have to work around things, and we have to, try to hack structures and so on. So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, that reminds me of something I heard a couple of years ago, that disabled people, so to speak, they don't have a choice to fail, and therefore they make good leaders and often good choices in the workplace.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Disabled people, people from from a working class background, people who are not part of the system, people who would have contributed a lot of labor to the system, but the system isn't designed for them or with them in mind. And then we have had to, many of us have had to just find ways to be resourceful. So we are many people who are not part of who don't have that social capital or cultural capital, or who are not, who are not poshos, who are not at 10 Downing Street, etc. It's not by choice, but we have had to be creative. We have had to be leaders. Otherwise, how would we have survived?
Yeah.
Within structures that aren't built for so many of us, you know. When I say us, I mean a huge diversity of people, neurodivergent people, disabled people, however people like to define themselves, and also racially diverse people, also people who are queer, I mean, people who are trans, etc. We're just seeing so much amazing, astonishing kind of backlash going on. It's just incredible. So, yeah.
Yeah, there's like, I think the pandemic and lockdown and everything's really just had a huge shift on collective consciousness. There's a real shift into values, and like an upsurgence, and you know, it's a neurodiversity movement. I know I'm going to probably keep pulling towards that.
Yeah.
Can you say something? I suppose that leads to what I read about when you came over to the UK from Malaysia.
Singapore.
Is it? Singapore. And
that's quite touchy.
I thought, no, I just did a wiki because my geography is rubbish, and I just did a wiki, and
so is mine.
Yeah, I need to brush up on that.
You.
Okay. So when you came over and you described Singapore as not having any differences, everybody is a tropical in a paradise, and when you came here, you realized that you're really going to have to explore your own identity and maybe utilize some of these avenues, labels even, so to speak, which is something that speaks to me, because I had to do that in order to succeed and to find out, you know, how come I don't fit, how come nothing's working here.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, and that sort of, not just, it is in a moment, that kind of process of kind of becoming yourself. It's interesting, and what if it's diagnosis or the understanding that you are different, how that then kind of, how then you negotiate that. Because for me, I don't think that's a given. It doesn't, like, okay, I'm autistic, I'm this, that's it, no. And it so happens that I have so many labels that I have to play with, or I'm given by choice or not by choice. Being a woman, being vertically challenged, being a non-white person, being a person of color, being from the global south, etc., global majority, etc. So yeah, in Singapore, there I didn't know anything about neurodiversity, even up to, I mean, even if you're not neurodivergent, the Singaporean kind of educational system is brutal. It's been well discussed. It's been well discussed to an extent, but it's still pretty much, sadly, the reality. Lots of people struggle. There's a lot of and myself included. So, and of course, I didn't know of the kind of additional element, but I did not, like, for a few years in my secondary school, I just didn't talk to anyone. But it was also because I just felt, okay, I don't fit. I just do not fit into everything. So for 2 years I didn't speak, And it was also because I was in a school full of girls from wealthy backgrounds, because I come from a working class background, speak Mandarin at home, and those girls speak English at home, so they're really westernized, really progressive, etc. And so I didn't know any of that, but of course, fortunately for me, I've always had art to turn to, and I've always had a space which was where I could create my own worlds, and I literally did that when I was young. So I would make fantastical drawings of other worlds and
Like the one behind you.
Huh?
Is that one of yours behind you?
Oh well, this is current. That's one example. Do you want to buy it? I'll give you a discount.
I do really like it.
It's a drawing. It's a digital drawing, but it also exists in as a print. So I've always had art, so that's always been my go-to place. But when I came to the UK first, when I was 19, on a scholarship, and I was really, really fortunate. For so many, in so many ways, I was really, really fortunate. My parents didn't want me to be a lawyer because I'm so argumentative, and they thought, you might as well make some money while you're arguing with people. But then they also, because they're really traditional and Chinese, people of Chinese ethnicity, and they want me to make money, right? But I was like, no, I'm making art. And I got the scholarship. I came to the UK, and that was actually when for the first time in my life, I was free from the sort of claustrophobia. And when I say claustrophobia, I mean geographically. Singapore is a really small place, but also in other senses, I just felt, okay, I can try things out. I can be different kinds of me. I don't know what me was yet at that time. To be fair, I still don't know what me could be or is. But I was kind of then also able to just work on my art full time, and that slowly became something that I took ownership of, and that was how I became me. And then the actual realization of how I am clinically considered as different is really recent, like 5 years ago or so.
Yeah.
So that's like, whoa, wait a minute, I've been me for nearly centuries, or a long time.
Yeah.
What am I going to do with this label? What am I going to do with this additional label? So there was a lot more unpacking to do.
Yeah. Did you find that there's a bit of a cost to that as well, with the stigma and a bit of confusion as well on the side, a bit of denial?
Absolutely, I'm very critical of the many process. Many people have. I'm just trying to say 20 sentences at one time.
Okay.
Okay, slow down. There are many. I love the NHS. It's an amazing, outstanding system.
Yeah.
Unparalleled. However, there are issues in terms of trying to get access to service, which is also why I'm very critical of terms like service users. What service? I don't actually have access to service. But also, the whole basis of diagnosis is a very medical model, right? But that is still that remains the kind of standard, in that students, workplace, etc., you need to have a medical diagnosis. You need to go through occupational health. You need to work with someone at occupational health in order to start to have access to support. And that's not it. Each time you're still asked, are you sure? People ask me, do you have are you officially registered as a disabled person? So are you really? I mean, you've got a PhD, you don't look, etc. So there's still that kind of, so the whole premise of diagnosis, I have a real problem with, and many colleagues have written about it, discussed it. Ginny Russell, she's at the University of Exeter. She's done like 20 years of just solid, excellent research, and including around diagnosis. But so the whole premise is really problematic. So so the label that's being used, like, oh, I'm autistic or I'm this or that, that's really problematic as well. Even though it also opens up a lot of avenues, like you can find people similar to you, but it's also quite problematic because often the labels are very what's the word, they point to certain features, but oftentimes, and humans are messy and we have messy and magical entanglements. So I'm not just autistic. Other processes co-occur, you know, dyslexia, learning differences, so it's synesthesia, etc. So it's complex, and therefore frameworks like neurodiversity is useful because it takes a step back and it kind of looks at things in a more holistic way. And also neurodiversity looks at, it is aligned with the concept of biodiversity, which I think, yeah, it makes it the frame that when you frame it like that, then it, yeah, of course, every being has a place in a biodiverse world. Every being has a place in a neurodiverse world. So yeah, so it's interesting. So it's interesting to bring us back to your question. So that having the label is not the end of the story. So the confusion, the questioning, and which was also why I started to do which was also why I initiated a 2-3 year project at King's College London to kind of unpack that. So it can answer questions, it can bring relief to people, but it also isn't the end of the story. There's so much more kind of negotiations to make. So I always think of that as a process rather than, okay, that's it.
Excellent. So is that what whoever said it about you meant by absolutely instrumental? You are, because when I was doing my fine art degree, I got immersed into live art with Hester Reeve, and then I got introduced to Bohm dialogue, which was I think the best part, most productive part. But do you think that you are the art and the artist at the same time?
Oh, absolutely.
And the tension arising from all that is almost like the generator of your art.
Yeah, great question. First, I'll address the quote about being absolutely instrumental. So that was a colleague writing in a publication in a peer-reviewed article about my work in something called running studies, and it's basically looking at running, but looking at it not just in terms of fitness. Yes, we do talk about that too, but also saying, how does that change how you understand people around you? How does that, when you're moving at speed, how do you then see the streets around you, for instance? So it's about just saying, what if we kind of look at other aspects of running? So that was a large part of my work, and that was before I knew anything about neurodiversity, or before my discovery or diagnosis. So that was something I was involved in. But basically, it's just me being nosy and like, what if it's just me going around the world? Like, why don't we do this? Why don't we look at this way? And I did that for running. So that was that.
And that was really fortunate to find yourself with a vehicle or a framework to be able to explore that as an artist, and not many artists have that confidence.
Well, it's also about being opportunistic. It's also about being, I want to have a say on it, and
great, and
that really relates to what I'm doing now, and that relates to your question about how I see art penetrating into every aspect of life and my life, because like people are social scientists, or people are politicians. They're like, I have a say in everything. I have a say about women's bodies, for example, right?
Yep.
That's something that's just happening right now as we speak. And I can't convey the kind of shock and disgust at what's happening. And artists have also always done that. Like, this is a piece of, I don't know, wood. I'm going to use that in my art. Nobody ever gave, I don't know, Brancusi or anyone permission to, I'm going to play with steel, or Picasso collage. Nobody said, you're allowed to do that. No, Andy Warhol was like, I'm going to put some soup cans, and that's art. So nobody also ever gave artists the permission to kind of play with things, but many artists would say, what if, I want to kind of mess around with it. And that's basically me doing that to things, but also getting frustrated with just things in the art world and kind of saying, I think artists have a role in social aspects and political, or what has been defined as social or political aspects of life. And obviously there's a huge tradition. I'm not the first one. There's socially engaged art. There's live art, obviously. People using their bodies to protest, people using their bodies as creative medium of intervention. So my work very much is kind of entrenched in some of those movements. So I'm saying, as I move about in the world, I am going to be making artistic or artful interventions, and that's the term I use to describe my work. So for instance, I volunteer. For instance, I sit on I help out at a charity that uses music to work with detained migrants, and that I'm not creating an artistic output, but I see that completely as part of my art.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It really does, yeah. And I was hoping you'd mention the word agitation as well.
Yeah, agitation. Yeah. It's about trying to make art and make change, or not make direct changes, because it's always very hard to track a linear, and I wouldn't be so immodest as to say, because of this happened. Yeah. But I think it's to catalyze conversations and other actions and other provocations by other people that can lead to change. It's little stuff. It's little things that build and build and build and build that can create what could be culture change, practice, or change in attitudes in one person or one institution, or
I don't know how far down this road we can go, but I'm thinking about, because I was introduced to Bohm Dialogue, and it's now a compulsory part of the undergrad, the BA Honours Fine Art at Hallam. First years have to take part in some Bohm Dialogue. Basically, for everyone listening, if you don't know what it is it was brought in. We're taking the art. When you sit around and you critique a piece of art as a group, you take away the art, and what's left, you've just got thinking and language together. And Hester Reeve brought it into the curriculum. She's been attending Bohm Dialogues for many years in the UK after Professor David Bohm, and it's a very simple but very profound creative process. And why was I talking about that? Oh, it's gone out of my mind now.
No, it sounds really useful, and the fact that it's now compulsory, because I'm not familiar with that. So that's it. Thanks. So what I wanted to do when I left uni, I dabbled with it with school kids and refugees for a bit, and turning the art gallery into a classroom. Yeah. And then some of the big government cuts came in. This was like 10 years ago. So I went down a different route, but then I got my diagnosis after having a couple of failed businesses, including a healthy chocolate spread business. Why didn't that work? I don't know.
But I got so confused. I went to my GP and he referred me to the autism service, and they said, yes, Asperger's, yes, ADHD, right, okay. So then I have to turn the other way. And then that's when the autism dialogue popped into my head. The word, oh, we can use dialogue to inquire about autism.
Yeah.
But what's happening now is I spent 5 years with a very minimal amount of funding, but it's so important to me to just keep creatively agitating people's minds.
Yeah, exactly.
We're hoping, we're a CIC now, and we're just hoping to
Oh, well done. Wow.
to be recognized. But if that doesn't happen, I know that a few people's minds have been shifted because of what they say. And that's
the fact that you are creating these spaces and you are broadcasting literally these voices, that is so important. I mean, in some communities, this is not discussed. It's not a thing to start with, and you can't talk about it. It's taboo. So
yeah,
and there's still parallels, like if you're gay in certain communities, or if you're queer or whatever, like, oh no, shut up,
yeah.
It's not a thing. Or
Yeah.
and in where I was growing up, or obviously you're supposed to just be working hard and to put your head down and not raise your hands and ask questions if you don't understand something in the classroom.
Yeah.
Just get on with it. So the fact that we are, and I don't use the word normalizing, because I think that's quite an ableist and binary kind of approach. But the fact that we are creating these noises, and it's a cacophony. It's not just one voice, it's different voices and different accents, different focuses, foci. Foci.
I like that. Foci. Yeah.
Octopus.
Yeah. Octopi doesn't, it's not actually a word. I found that out yesterday. Definitely
What?
octopuses.
So it's octopuses?
Yeah.
Look at that.
Don't quote me on it.
I am quoting you on that. I'm really disturbed.
I'm going to edit this out. Never mind.
Don't, because my work, I look at octopuses, and of course I didn't invent that. So I'm original. But I like cats and I like octopus, so I just put them together.
Yeah, well, the plural of cats is cacti. No, I'm only joking.
No, that's a dad joke. That is a really dad joke.
That's a bit cruel.
It's a good one. It's a good one.
Yeah. So just to finish that dialogue thing, and maybe we'll come on to your thoughts about mind wandering. I want to talk about that in a sec. But the interesting thing is that neurodiversity dialogues have really shown me systemically how this conversational, this personal, what started out as a personal inquiry is now a collective inquiry, but it relates to the wider world and the system as much as it does on a personal level. You think about politics. Is politics really creative, or does it need agitation? And the way that society works, the dominant mindset, it's so stagnant. It does need agitating. It's necessary. So
absolutely. So a lot of my current research precisely looks at that, and I look at the notion of leadership. And a lot of us are like, oh, leaders. Oh, I mean, just look around us. We don't have good role models at all. Putin, Poshos, anyone. Yeah. So, and in the arts, many of us just cringe at, oh, I don't use the word lead. It's such a neoliberalist construct, etc. But I'm also saying, no, we need to go back to the drawing board with those terms and actually take ownership of that. And we need to look at creative explorations, creative approaches. Sylvia Pankhurst, of the Pankhurst fame, of the suffragette fame, she was an artist, right? So how did she, what is the connection? Of course, Zelensky was an actor, right? Yeah. So I think, so there have been, and of course Leonardo da Vinci, right? And also he was neurodivergent. He's been thinking about flying. He's been helping us try to so he's been externalizing those wild visions, which helped to create a blueprint, even though they didn't really work because he got the kind of mechanics wrong. But it helped to say, oh, okay, we can think about flying.
Process.
That's leadership, right?
Yep.
Because that's innovation. So we don't necessarily use those terms, and so I'm currently the whole reason why I moved my whole life from South London and Singapore, well, London to Manchester up north, is to be a program leader of a new program on leadership. And it's exactly to kind of say, look, artists have been doing leadership for centuries. Right. And now everyone is talking about creativity, but artists need to be in the same room to have that discussion. And so do neurodivergent people, because World Economic Forum, Nesta, everyone's saying, oh, neurodiversity is such a great thing. Oh, because look at Silicon Valley. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So there's a lot of discussion, but neurodivergent people need to be the ones doing that talking also. So not just talked about. So that's part of my work. I'm saying, okay, I'm going to use that language. I'm going to try to unpack that. And I'm going to say, look, how about this? We need to look at a much more diversified approach to leadership. So it's not just about this charismatic one person who is lucky, etc. But it's to look at co-creation. It's to look at how, you know, alternative ways of organizing. It's to look at, yeah, all kinds of resourcefulness that we were talking about earlier. So yeah, so you hit the nail on the head when you said, yeah, we need to look at doing politics in a more creative way, for example. So there needs to be, yeah, we need to be, and what's happening now is the opposite, right? It's a kind of a regression. It's like, whoa, goodness, what's going on? It's very unimaginative.
Yeah, sorry. It's got to be co-creative, though, hasn't it? It's just take the deficit model of
absolutely.
For example, we can't be seen as too much of a challenge. It comes down to the right people being in the room.
And yeah, and that's something I'm negotiating or learning now, and because it isn't easy to be in the room. I mean, there's a lot of architectural metaphors around this. It's about the glass ceiling or the glass labyrinth. Get your what through the door, something. Get your feet through the door, or like, you know, like, yeah. And then breaking down those barriers. So yeah, a lot of times we aren't even anywhere near. Like my father couldn't even complete school. He wasn't even because he's from the wrong class and wrong era. So it's like we need to keep getting closer, and then to get into the room, and then to also change. And that's and I'm quoting other colleagues who have been doing a lot of work. They say we don't just get to the same room or the same table. You change the table. You change the dynamics of the table.
Yeah. Or take away the table in our case.
Take away the table, sit on the floor. I don't know, something. Go for a run, you know. But you need to engage, and that's why for me a lot of my work is open source. A lot of my, like the network I've set up, I want to set up and I want it to be open. There's no kind of what's it called, like a membership thing, or I want it to be entangled, messily with the larger world, rather than to have things close. So yeah, so I like things to be leaky, because I don't want to, the word could be ghettoize what I'm doing. So I because I think it a lot of this sort of work needs to, it needs to be in conversation with the rest of the world, and they're missing out, right? I think it's their loss.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know, it's brave and risky, and like you said right at the beginning, it's making yourself vulnerable. But to get the leaders from big organizations into the room, because we do need the leaders in there, otherwise it ain't going to work.
You do need to get the buy-in, and you do need to, so yeah, so there's a range of, there's an artillery, there's a range of strategies. So that's one of the things that is important to do, to engage with people who do have power, to engage with people who do have the social political capital, to engage with people who can help to change the conversation.
Yeah.
And some of the different terms can be used: allies, accomplices.
Yeah.
But I'm also quite critical of some people who call themselves allies and they actually don't help out. They actually take.
Yeah.
And so yeah, there's a lot of it's interesting, and it's definitely risky, and it's definitely a lot of people say I'm really bold and courageous. Often I don't have that filter, or I'm just foolish, and I'm also like, what have I got to lose kind of thing, because I don't really have that kind of sense of boundary. But also often I'm like, yeah, I know what the lines are, and I'm going to go. And I think, and I do make use of my privileges. I absolutely do make use of that.
Yeah.
Because also, I mean, I'm 5'2", and people think, oh, she's such a innocent looking, nice. I don't know whose voice I'm doing. She's such a nice, innocent Asian little Oriental girl, and submissive and kind. And I'm like, yeah, okay, get me in, and then I'm going to start turning tables, and then get others in. Get others in, mix things up.
So that, just want to ask you, pick your brains a little bit about the idea of a dialogue where, well, so the whole autism dialogue model, where all my dialogue, and I'm trying to branch out into dialogue. The world needs dialogue is what the Academy of Professional Dialogue, that's their motto. For me, the world is dialogue. You know, I take it to a metaphysical level. Everything's in communication with everything else anyway. But let's not go down there. We haven't got time today. But the thing is, like, the frameworks are constantly evolving. Yeah. And you know, every few years a new model comes up. Like, it was Peter Senge's fifth discipline, and now it's
what's the fifth discipline?
It's about 20 years ago. It's a best-selling big fat book all about organizational development, radical new ways of communicating, leaderful environments. There's Otto Schengen, Theory U. There's a lot of quite radical, cutting edge ways of seeing organizations, how they work. And that's what's interesting to me about David Bohm, because he was a quantum scientist, and he saw the difference between thought and thinking. And thought is more like a static, fixed, and thinking is a dynamic. So, you know, and he entirely thought it possible that a group of people can literally think together. Nice. If you set up the parameters well enough. And that turns it into a generative dialogue. You've got to get the buy-in, like you say. So I don't know where I was going with that.
No, I like that. The idea that, because you can imagine what's the opposite. You're not allowed to talk. You're not allowed to, it's hush hush. You're not allowed to, and it's not generative. It's not iterative. It's fixed. It's static.
Yeah, and some people
This is what it is. A person is supposed to be like that. That's it.
Yeah.
Don't conform. Oh, too bad. So.
Yeah. And we do have to take turns, you know, and that's a human thing.
And listen to others and learn. And I interrupted you.
Yeah, no, it happens it's human. It's human.
I'm excited. Sorry.
No, some people believe in the silent consent. They think it's silent consensus that you because you have to listen to somebody else talking, you're being submissive. Well, no, that's not the case. You're seeing things from a different perspective. And that's what, when you suspend your own some opinions and everything, you learn something new. Absolutely. You know, and those coming together of minds.
And there was a lot of that learning. in the 2020 Black Lives Matter reckoning, and people were like, yeah, there's a lot of learning to do, there's a lot of listening to do, and it's not like those voices were new, but those voices were not listened to for a long time. It's not that racism was new or is new. It's just that people, those voices have been pushed aside and silenced. So yeah, absolutely, that need to listen and hold the space for the other person, and you're learning.
I've realized I'm trying to get you to buy into dialogue. That's what's going on, perhaps going on at the back of my mind.
You get a commission, buy in. 50%.
I'll send you the contract after this. Yeah, I just really think it'd be great to have another conversation.
Well, one aspect of my work is about dating, speed dating. So I think of dialogue. I've been thinking of dialogues in multiple different ways.
Yeah.
And so speed dating is one way where I have very quick chats with other people, because if they're boring, I can end it. You see you later.
Yeah,
but
very
also,
good. Very good.
Yeah, another process of dialogue that I used was something that I started with a geographer, Ellen Latham, and we call it productive antagonisms. And basically we were trying to describe our dialogue, myself as an artist and him as a geographer. And and we were talking about our running work, and we were saying, okay, what happens when a geographer and an artist meet, and how does running help to connect them or contrast how they're thinking? So the positivity of the antagonism is important. So it isn't just trying to collide for its own sake, or being controversial for its own sake, but it's actually saying, okay, let's see what happens when we collide. Are there creative sparks that result from this collision? Excellent. So I really like that. And it's also about going out of your comfort zone and being vulnerable, etc. And talk to members of other species, talk to people who are not like you, talk to people that you think, okay, not sure where this will go, but let's try it. And that was how I did my magic carpet work at King's College London, where I had a conversation with an amazing psychiatrist who turned out to be amazing. So yeah.
And you've got there's a symposium coming up, isn't there? Is that an in-person thing?
There's a couple. Which one? There is one online.
Psychiatry.
There's a few. There's a couple that's online. There's one in person at Oxford, at the University of Oxford, and I am collaborating with a good friend, and Dr. Mohammed Rashid. He's a philosopher turned psychiatrist. No, psychiatrist turned philosopher, and now he's practicing again. But we've worked together for a few years, and he's invited me to help him out. And we're going to do a workshop as part of the summer school for professionals and academics from all over the world. And we are just going to exactly explore kind of difficult relationships. And in that case, we're looking at how when a psychiatrist, for example, is working with a patient or service user, whatever the term it is that you want to use, and how can they meet? How such two very different people with very different lived experiences and understanding and ways of processing the world, how can they meet? So beyond language. So I'm helping him up to kind of create some exercises to think of those possibilities. And then there are a couple more kind of online things that I'm doing. I can't remember. Also around kind of equity, creativity, and so on.
Yeah. And have you got any art shows coming up? I just keep thinking about the beautiful, stunning image of the carpet.
Yeah, I am in the process of making a couple of things. I'm not showing them just yet. I do put some kind of work in progress on my website, but because I've been using the motif of the octopussy, so the cat, the kitty face, the cat, the face of a cat, a cat with a Cheshire, like a Cheshire cat with a grin, and the body of an octopus. So I've been exploring the idea of tentacularity for a while, and I am going to have something done so that it can be permanently on my body.
Ah, right.
And I'm filming that, and that will go to something else that I'm working on, which is hopefully my first book, Famous Last Words. But I'm filming the process, and I'm going to distribute images of the process and onto the book, so that when you flip it, hopefully it looks like a flip book kind of thing.
Yeah. Great.
So watch this space.
Brilliant. I think we could leave it there. It's been real exciting, like condensed pleasure chatting with you.
Yeah, thank you for no, I'm sorry I kept interrupting you because I'm excited.
Oh, I was. I thought I was
Well, you're the host. So no, thank you. It's been great chatting with you.
Yeah, it's
Thanks for
likewise.
creating these spaces.
I hope we get to talk again sometime.
Yeah,
Thank you for your
absolutely.
time. Thank you for your time.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you.